You're listening to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall on CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. So, Jim, yes, it was a rough week. We talked about Francois Legault all week. This tunnel debacle not going away anytime soon. So the week's done. Are his issues done? Trouble's over?
Let me give you 3 examples of how Francois Legault's life has changed in a very fundamental way. Example number 1. Yesterday, a column was written saying basically Francois Legault does not know how to deal with criticism, and he had better get himself straightened out if he wants to keep on being premier. Here's the thing. That column appeared in the Journal de Montreal. Number 2, a survey conducted for Le Soleil up in Quebec City found that 50% of respondents who voted for the CAQ in the last election would not have voted for them had they known they're going to be double-crossed on the tunnel project. Exhibit C, the Parti Québécois, exhibiting an alacrity and presence of mind, which I can only attribute to their leader, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, has put together what is, for all intents and purposes, an election campaign ad today. And you're going to say, well, it's 3 years away. I can't think of a better time to put this kind of an ad out than today. It's a 60-minute spot, and as I am wont to do on this show on numerous occasions, it doesn't have to go over the top. It simply lists all of the promises Francois Legault has broken since he became Premier of Quebec. So like 90% of that spot is headlines of Legault saying one thing and then the next headline showing he did something else, whether it's immigration, French language protection, changing the voting system, and of course the tunnel. I have not seen this ever during Monsieur Legault's stewardship of this province, and I don't think this is a one-off. I think the tone has changed, the direction has changed. I would think, certainly because I think this ad dropped this morning, I would think at least the Liberals might, get a knock in the back of the head and maybe want to put together one of their own. Because the PQ ad, even though it has a very election campaign flavor, is in fact a drive for membership. And perhaps the Liberals could take a leaf from their book and do the same. Nothing out of Quebec Solidaire, but once again, Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois is basically Francois Legault's walking migraine. So perhaps they don't have to spend the money on ads. But all of a sudden, the CAQ's running the table, but the players have just got a lot more feisty. Perhaps they're putting a little more chips on the line than they have in the past.
Now, you said, and I think you meant to say a 60-second ad. You said a 60-minute. It's not an hour.
Oh, no, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I just checked because that would be really bad.
I know the PACs do tend to go on, but not that long.
Not that long. Okay.
Yeah. It just feels like an hour.
All right. So that's the story as far as that's concerned today. I guess the other thing that's going on, have you heard, by the way, because we saw this as a breaking news story when we came in, some kind of deal in the public service sector strike? Anything that you've heard?
Nothing apart from what you guys have heard. But here's the thing. If the union's already saying we're not interested, they're probably saying you guys better order some pizza because we're going to be here tonight.
Okay.
They'll probably, we're at the face-saving stage now where both sides have to look as if they were very, very clever and, snatched a deal from the jaws of what was going to be perhaps a very embarrassing strike for both sides. But at the moment, I think that's where we are. As I said at the very beginning, this is nothing more than political theater. It's just drama. I think the workers know at this point, given the situation in the country and given the overall kind of surliness people have about the economy. They're probably, in the end, going to vote, maybe narrow, but they'll vote to accept. The question is when. Certainly, the feds seem to know that they've got the upper hand because despite the fact, I think someone's actually launched a petition to extend the deadline for filing income taxes to June 1st. They are not budging. So, and which also is a big part of that, of course, is most people file online now. So the idea of having humans deal with it is not that big a deal. But all that said, I doubt we'll be talking about this next week. I may be wrong, but I have a sneaking suspicion maybe by Wednesday this will all be over.
Oh, Wednesday. Okay. I was going to ask you if you thought they might clinch this deal over the weekend since they're going to be negotiating.
Oh, hey, listen, anything is possible. But like I say, it's you know, it's like I say, it's like having an argument, but you want to save face. So you extend the argument for no good reason, if only to make yourself look good at the end. That's why I think we're in here.
Perfect. So you're right about it being theater. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of felt too like we don't find out about a deal, what's on the table, until it's either been rejected or accepted. So then that gives me the impression that somehow they haven't outright rejected this yet, and that there is some hope with whatever has been put on the table. But is that how things go down?
I'd be very surprised if between now and this evening, or even now, certainly tomorrow by lunchtime, someone's going to be leaking like a sieve. Okay. Because, as I say, I think they both want a settlement. And if they turn around and sort of like if the feds want to turn around and make us think we're being reasonable here, and you know, because they're offering 9, if they say, well, we'll give them 10. And because I think they were looking for some ridiculous, like 15 or something in the beginning, but that's how negotiations work. Right. But the fact is, you'll start seeing leaks, if not tonight, tomorrow, and there will be, I think, a push on both sides to get this done, because I think they realize, for different reasons, but for the same goal, that public patience is running out on.
Mm-hmm. So your next story here, the next headline, is something that I think now we become so accustomed to this, Jim, we're not really paying much attention to it anymore. The fact that, so we know there were fires lit, 3 of them just in the last 24 hours. I think I read something, there's a gun incident now in the city of Montreal at least once, sometimes twice a week. So this has become the new normal.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I know we have this conversation and we get, you know, somebody to come on and say, well, no, you know, statistically, Montreal is still a very safe city. It is a safe city statistically. But I think the issue now is what people think. And the fact is, and I would respectfully submit, at this point, it's probably more than once or twice a week. But all that said, buildings getting shot up, cars getting torched, I don't think it's so much a feeling of fear, but one that suggests I'm living in a town where people can do things with a certain amount of impunity. Because the frequency of this, I spent more than half my career covering crime, and I've never seen this. I mean, I remember in the 90s, people were perhaps more insouciant about, you know, the biker war that was going on, even though a lot of people were getting killed. Yet this just seems eerily, and it's not, you know, this is the other thing, it's not confined to one neighborhood. You can't say, well, it's all the East End or SRDP. It's everywhere. It's the West Island. It's downtown. It's out east. It's in the North End. It is literally across this island. And is it anything spectacular? Not really, unless your house was the one being targeted for gunfire. But I think the time is going to come where this is going to be an issue, municipally and perhaps even provincially, because I know, you know, we have all these task forces going after firearms and whatever. But the fact is, the guns are still out there. And they're being fired. What I think a lot of our listeners would get the impression, I certainly have it. I know it's not the case exactly, but it's like if it's not every night, it's every other night. Somebody's shooting a gun somewhere.
It feels like that. Yeah.
This is an element of this city that doesn't fit into the whole sort of joie de vivre motif. So I'm really wondering if we're going to see the creation of yet another task force, or whether the cops are stretched so thin as it is that they're just keeping their heads above water. But all that said, the feeling, I think the tone of the city has changed. And I'll bet you there's a lot of people who make plans at night, especially if you don't want to go out, go to clubs or whatever, might think twice about doing it given the amount of incidents that are going on.
You know, it's funny as you say that. I think to myself, maybe a couple of years ago, we looked at Toronto and said, wow, look what's going on there. That's pretty awful. Gun violence, gang violence. And now look here, you don't have to go that far. It's our backyard now. It's starting to happen here.
Yeah, but there were people back then who said, well, you know, that's Toronto. That's not, you know, and the people in Montreal said, you better be careful, because they were seeing it at the ground. It was building up. Yeah. And they were told, oh, don't be ridiculous. There's no comparison. Well, guess what? There's a comparison. So here we are.
James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, you have a good weekend.
You too, guys.